Good morning, campers. Rock Radio Camp Half-Blood, a Percy Jackson read-along podcast. I am your host, Zach.
And I'm B.
And this week we read Chapter 4 of The Last Olympian, We Burn a Metal Shroud. And B, did you hear that?
Did I hear what? Oh, the music, the intro music?
Oh,
yeah.
Yes, our bit that we put it together. Yes, our new intro music. It's great. I love it.
I'm glad we finally have a theme song. It's a little ditty for our show.
It took us 100 episodes, but we finally got it.
Yeah. I'm pretty happy about that. It feels like it's official now. Wow, it only took us 100 episodes.
Yeah, it took us 101 episodes. Give us a minute, people. We're really slow. Did you know Abraham Lincoln just became the 16th president of the United States?
Yeah. Oh, wait, no, did you hear what happened to him at the theater?
Wait, what happened to him at the theater? I hope he's okay.
Yeah, the reviews of Our American Cousin weren't great.
Well, I mean, it makes sense. I just want to thank the Duke and Duchess podcast for making this lovely theme, especially Chad Dukes. It's a really fun podcast. They do something very similar to our show, but with fantasy books. And Chad's never read these books, and Liz has, or they both read fantasy, but sometimes they don't read certain fantasy books. It's fun because they've done some of my favorite series, and it's fun because I don't get a chance to listen to other people have genuine reactions. So please check them out. They're really fun, and that's pretty much the plug. B, what did you think of this chapter?
It was a downer, I guess. It's a real downer. I don't know.
I think the best way to put it, B, is it's the worst Disney Channel original movie that I've watched so far, and I've been watching a lot of Disney Plus, because this might be one of the most, what's the best way to put this? This is the most informative chapter that we've gotten, but also has been the most annoying in the terms of like teen romance.
What, because of the love triangle between Rachel Elizabeth Dare and Percy and Annabeth, or what specifically? Yeah, that part.
Well, that specifically, but also the bummer funeral where everyone still has to have teen romance involved to it.
Yeah, there's that too. Yeah, a kid died. I mean, I feel like you'd maybe not care about the other stuff, but maybe also the emotions are heightened. I don't know. It's a complicated situation. I mean, it literally opens up on Percy's weird dream about Rachel, which I guess we'll get into.
Yeah, we'll get into that, but we also get one of the biggest questions of the series finally answered.
In what would that be?
What happens when two demigods...
Oh, yes, that's true. I did notice that in this chapter. Yeah, so they do answer why it's not creepy that when demigods date, which feels like a cop-out because it sort of doesn't really make sense, but it's fine. We're fine, right?
B, this just felt like the Percy Jackson mandate. Rick Riordan got a note from his publishers. Please explain this, and quickly.
Yeah, I think so. I think a lot of people were already like shipping Percy and Annabeth and other characters together, and then there was a moment probably in like an editor's room where they were like, wait a second, their parents are, so that means, hold on, and like they're drawing sort of like lines on a blackboard, like this doesn't add up.
I think what happened was the book sales for like Battle Labyrinth came out and they're like, yeehaw, and then they realized it and they're like, oh no.
Yeah, that's probably what it is. I think someone was like, you need to explain this. Because I felt that way. I've been saying that for a long time. Like, basically since The Lightning Thief, when it becomes almost immediately apparent that Annabeth and Percy are set up to be some sort of love interest situation. So, like, this is kind of a slow burn. This is the last book in the series. The first book in the series already has it set up for them to be not just friends.
They're destined to fall in love.
So I think it was just this question that seemed obvious, I guess, to me, maybe not to everyone. I'm kind of glad he answered it, even though it doesn't necessarily seem satisfactory.
We'll talk about it. I feel like there's plenty to talk about with this.
Yeah.
But this chapter opens up like most preteen boys. They dream about a girl.
Yeah, a very aggressive dream about Rachel, where she's throwing darts.
And her weird, angry, passive-aggressive obsession with him. And how she has a picture of him that she is throwing darts at his face.
Yeah, that seems like a real, teen aggression thing. Also, just, why is that such a heavily featured theme in movies and books and stuff, where people throw darts at pictures? I've never thrown a dart at a picture.
I don't know. I'm sure there's plenty of exes that you'd be like, maybe if I throw this pointy object at them, maybe better things might happen in my life.
Yeah. In general, okay, I feel like the concept of darts is like ill-advised from the start. Like, let's, in a pub, put a cork board and we're gonna throw metal objects at it. It just doesn't seem like a logical sort of setup.
Like back in the old country, we would get really hammered and throw pointy objects at the British, hopefully.
Or in this case, she's throwing pointy objects at the boy who she likes but hates, and she loves him but she hates him. It's very Helga Pataki.
Oh, I was about to say that. It's very Hey Arnold, like Helga-ish, but Helga is really creepy. Like, she is really creepy if you think about it.
No, she has big stalker energy. At least, like, they have an established relationship, and she's not just, like, weirdly standing in an alleyway making some sort of soliloquy at a locket. It's not, like, that level of weird.
Oh,
but,
my football head.
It's more like a well-deserved kind of tension between them, because he's kind of a jerk to her. Let's be honest, he's kind of a jerk to both of his love interests, because he kind of is, like, halfway committed to both of them, and he's bad at talking about his feelings because he's a 15-year-old boy who also is a demigod.
You gotta think of it this way. When it comes to Rick Riordan writing romance, he's just like, the best way. I don't know why I'm doing a nerd voice for Rick Riordan.
Okay, we're gonna try to get him on the show, so maybe do a more flattering, do like what you think would be a handsome voice for
a
Rick
southern
Riordan.
draw. I don't know why.
Why would he
I know
be southern? He's not even southern.
For some reason, I'm just imagining him in like a stark white suit. While I do believe that Percy Jackson and Annabeth Chase I do believe they do get together.
Your southern accent is sort of, it's like veering in to Colonel Sanders and then taking a really sharp left turn at Seuss from Gravity Falls. It's like a very wild ride.
Okay, so what I'm just trying to say is that when it comes to Rick Riordan, not in his nerd voice, but he just sounds very plainly, sounds like me, is that it can be really tricky when it comes to like writing love triangles because you're trying to make it interesting for everybody. But the problem though is that there's always going to be the one person the character will always default to. It's almost like it's almost being strong-armed almost, like you know what the outcome's going to be like, and there really isn't any drama.
Yeah, like the manufactured drama of having a third person. I see what you're saying, because in some weird way, it's better written than a lot of love triangles because it's still like believable.
Sorry.
Yeah. Let's not roast certain books, but yeah, it's like it's believable that he would like Rachel because she's not like objectively better or worse than Annabeth. In some ways, I like Rachel better, and I think that she is kind of a nice foil to Percy's inability to be blunt with people. Like, she just kind of asks him straightforward and isn't as like kind of like huffy and weird like the way that Annabeth is like, why doesn't Percy just tell me that he likes me, or why doesn't Percy get all my hints? It's like, well, you're not being straightforward, so he's kind of just doing exactly what you're doing. Well, at the very least, I feel like Rachel has kind of an assertiveness that overpowers Percy's obliviousness.
See, when it comes to their relationship, Rachel is more like an extrovert when she comes to talking about her emotions, whereas Annabeth is, I don't like to use this term, but she comes off as like hard to get almost. Like she's very...
Yeah, no, I know what you're saying. Yeah, I think that's sort of a weird trope. I understand why you'd feel uncomfortable using that phrase because it has a lot of like complicated like misogynist implications with it, but I do think that there's like some level of like this particular like trope of teenage girl who's like, oh, well, I'm not going to like say how I feel to this guy, but I'm going to like give him hints and he's dumb that he doesn't pick up on it. And like, that's very much, I mean, we got that from the Demigod Files, right? She says that in that interview where she's like, oh, well, Percy, he misses he misses obvious things and it really frustrates me. And you know exactly what she's talking about.
So B, I think I might actually have a built-in reason for this, and this might be my really, really dumb headcanon.
Yeah.
Is that when it comes to demigods, they don't want to use like love and talk about affection because they actually know there actually is the god Aphrodite.
Yeah, that might be something.
So meaning if you start dropping out hints and stuff, it's like you have to almost be in code.
That's so interesting that that was the theory that you provided, because I totally thought what you were going to say was that demigods don't want to talk about relationships because they don't live very long and they have like this weird existential dread about talking about being with people, which could also be like me totally reading into this.
No, B,
where
that's
they're like, let's not talk about the future because we might be murdered by a minotaur, which like, I don't know, that's a possibility. That's probably too deep. Hashtag
Not
too deep.
necessarily. No, I don't think it's that way, because when it comes to, hey, babe, hey, dude, yeah, it's our last night together. We might be dead in the morning. Maybe we should, like, hold hands or something.
Yeah, I get. There's like that too. There's sort of like the existential threat might actually make people more affectionate. But that's kind of what Percy and Annabeth are, right? Like in times of stress, that's when they're most affectionate. It's like they just won the chariot race. Oh my God, Annabeth kissed him. It's like they're being pursued by some sort of horrible monster, and then they survived,
oh my God,
and
let's
then they
kiss.
like exactly. It's like always some sort of threat or like triumph or something that they tend to like express their emotions. So I do think that there is something to that to some extent. But then like a lot of the other times they're like kind of weird about communicating. Demigods are weird about communicating, but like again, we have to remember they kind of don't have parents or like anybody teaching them how to be people. They're just like, well, I don't know how to like teach you how to like talk to people, but here's a sword. Like that's basically Camp Half-Blood.
Well, also the two adult figures in their lives are an alcoholic god and Chiron. He's half horse.
Yeah, no, they're not the best role models, to be totally honest.
So what you got to do, Percy, is like Chiron's like, first you have to show him your hooves. Chiron, it doesn't work like that. I don't know how horses like, ooh, we have to woo a person. You have to look at their lovely mane. Chiron, I don't have a mane either. Oh, maybe this is more complicated than I thought.
Exactly, yeah. No, it's totally like, you know, in the musical when Selena Beauregard tries to get like love advice from Mr. D, and he's just like, I don't know, who cares, whatever. Like
I'm
that's
the god
like,
of alcohol.
that's totally like exactly. That's kind of the vibe I get where I'm like, they don't really have any sort of person demonstrating healthy relationships and like.
Well, the only person that could actually tell him about the birds and the bees would be Dionysus.
Oh God, he probably would though, but he would like get into all sorts of weird stuff with dryads, and then you'd be like, this is. Not what I
think of like
signed
the
up
episode of like Gravity Falls where Dipper and Mabel switch bodies, and Stan tries to explain what the birds and the bees is to Dipper / Mabel, and she's like, "Goodbye, childhood."
Yeah, it would probably. I mean, I think that Mr. D has similar energy to Uncle Stan, actually.
They're just the same person.
Yeah, it's the same kind of characterization of like this gruff, sort of lovable, but mostly criminal guy.
Yes. So kind of like to go with this dream is I actually find this dream to be so fascinating because you see it from Rachel's perspective, but also it's like that weird type of like fantasy rich person thing where like they describe her room and she has like everything super rich. She like wears a kimono and she just has like the world's biggest house.
Yeah, her room is messy, but you can't tell that it's messy because it's so big. Like that's like the way that they describe it.
It's bigger than Percy's entire apartment at home.
Yeah.
Which I find funny because I always think about like Richie Rich or something that's like comically rich people, and they kind of talk about this.
Oh, like the classic Christmas movie, Richie Rich's Christmas Wish.
Wait, that's an actual movie?
Yes, it is. It's so bad. Richie Rich is riding on snowmobiles, and he has a butler who has like a tattoo, and it's, oh man.
I always think about the Little Rascals with the really rich kid, and my favorite part of that though is his dad is played by Donald Trump, and it calls him. This is a cameo. Yes,
you could say that his actual kid is Richie Rich, so that's sort of real method acting.
Yeah, but he's actually a cameo in the movie. My favorite part about it is like he calls up his son. He's like, "You're the best son money could buy."
Oh God, no. I mean, like we've already joked that Rachel Elizabeth Dare seems like she could be Trump's kid, right? Because we were talking about how it's like this big influential like businessman who's like developing the natural world and is kind of terrible and is really rich.
It's funny because you have like this weird dynamic. Actually, you know what this reminded me of, this relationship is Jumanji. When you have Robin Williams' character, I always forget this, the kid version of him, but it's the exact same type of plot where the rich dad wants her to go to military school, or in this case, it's an all-girls school.
This is a really common storyline, I think, with like rich kids. I was actually watching, I don't know if you watched the show Anne with an E. It's like an Anne.
I was about to take a guess and be like, let me guess, Anne with an E.
Yeah, no, because we were watching it when you were here. But yeah, the same thing. There's like the character Diana, who's really rich, and they want to send her to finishing school. I think that's like such like a rich family idea where it's like, oh, we don't want to deal with you, but we have money, so we can just like send you away to some place to like. Actually, wait, in the Richie Rich's Christmas Wish movie, I think he's being sent to military school. I'm pretty sure. It's been a hot minute since I've watched that.
Yeah, but I like this interaction that they have because Rachel's mad because Percy isn't going with her, but also Rachel's dad doesn't know how to deal with her. It's a very common thing. Again, that's the weird like disconnect between like rich people. Is there's that trope too. Like you're so rich that you don't understand your kid.
They can't communicate. Yeah, that's definitely. I mean, that's why she's being sent away to school. I think it's like that sort of like, oh, I have so much money, I don't need to engage with my children because I have like all
Don't
this
worry, money
stuff
can buy
to
all the
throw at them.
happiness.
Exactly. Yeah, it's the money can't buy happiness thing, which is kind of interesting.
Yeah, or I guess would a sad rich person not have sock and boppers?
Wait, hold on a second. Are you implying that sock and boppers are the most luxurious item you can have?
Yes. I just imagine like a butler
I
comes
mean,
out with
maybe
like
if
one
you
of those.
bought them on eBay now, but I got them when I was a kid, and I'm pretty sure they were like less than $20. They're garbage pieces of plastic you filled with air.
B, I'm just imagining. I'm setting the scene for you. You have your butler Nettles. It comes in with like that weird silver platter. So your sock'em boppers.
Your boppers of soccer.
Oh, thank you, Niles. Thank you, Nettles.
And your monogrammed pajamas.
So you could bop and be rad at the same time. But okay, we really got to move on. Though there was one thing that I loved about this that made me laugh so hard, and she's her dad's talking to her, and he's like, "We can get you through this. I'm sorry, we'll have to talk to the therapist." Like the time he had grief counseling for your hamster that died.
Oh, I forgot about that grief counseling for the hamster.
Dad, I
feel
was
like
6.
that had like big like Harriet the Spy energy. Do you know like when she gets sent to like the weird child psychologist and you know that she has like this weird rich family who took her there because you know they could afford healthcare?
That's something that's only obtainable in a kid's book. Yes.
Yeah, exactly. The fantasy of like parents who would actually take a kid to a therapist. Like you gotta be rich for that.
No, I'm just imagining like how my brain works is just imagining little Rachel sitting in there. Yeah, my hamster died, and the therapist is like, "I'm gonna show you some splotches here, sweetie." And what do they look like? Well, this one looks like my hamster.
This one looks like a dead
that one
hamster.
Yeah, it looks like a dead. And like, oh, and the funny thing is that they're all hamster shaped.
Yeah, some like really messed up Rorschachs. Anyway, I thought that was kind of weird. I think that was like meant to establish that her parents were sort of like well-meaning, but like mostly just threw money at the problem, where they're like, oh, instead of talking through this like kind of really common sort of developmental thing that our kid is going through, let's just like take them to a therapist and maybe not talk through it first. And that's kind of what I thought that characterization was trying to do, where it's like, okay, well, her dad like isn't evil.
He's
Well,
not
he is evil.
He
Right?
just
I mean, he's
doesn't
kind
know
of
better.
evil. He's kind of evil because he does
No,
like
he's not.
he develops the natural world and he killed Pan. He didn't like he personally didn't go up to Pan and shoot him with a gun or anything, but like his type killed Pan.
I don't consider that evil because one, he
I
didn't
do.
know better. For me, I necessarily don't think that he's evil. I just think when it comes to it, he just didn't know better because I'm sure he would have probably stopped. Oh yeah, we're killing God itself. Quite indubitably, I think we should stop.
Okay, yes, I'm sure that if business people now thought that they were killing an ancient nature god by developing land, yes, probably they would maybe, I don't know, maybe some wouldn't stop. But I'm just saying, even regardless of that, he's kind of characterized as like, I don't know, the villain in a 90s environmental movie or something. You know, like the guy who'd be driving the truck in, what is that movie? Fern Gully.
B, he'd be driving the truck. He'd get out and he'd have like snake, like skin boots. And for some reason, he's also has a southern drawl.
Yes, and he has like a big 10-gallon hat like Doug Dimmadome.
Oh, actually, he's just secretly Doug Dimmadome.
Owner of the Dimsdale Dimmadome.
Yep. Though, I like that the whole ending of this kind of shows that Rachel's doing something kind of mysterious where she's now painting pictures of Luke.
Yeah, pictures of Luke as a child, which is weird, and he doesn't have a scar yet. It's kind of, that's something. I feel like that's somehow related to her looking through, being able to see through the mist, but we're not going to find out about that for a while, huh?
Maybe, who knows? But also the most important thing, though, that they say is that Rachel has painted a picture of the Empire State Building with a bunch of demigods at the front of it. And then Percy wakes up.
Of course he does, because that's how his dreams work. They're always narratively convenient and not quite explicative enough for him to like understand. Yeah.
Interrupt this attacked.
Exactly. It's the typical Rick Riordan, like, well, we're going to give you just enough information and then we're going to take it away. Just as things are getting interesting.
I do like the idea that Percy Jackson wants to call her, but of course the rules of the world is that he can't have a cell phone, which would have been also kind of awkward. Hey, Rachel, I had a dream about you and just making sure that you have weird paintings.
And then he like can't totally talk about it with Annabeth because he like feels weird about having a dream about Rachel, even though it's like not like he was pining after her in this dream. It was more like she was throwing darts at him, and also it was like not quite a dream, it was a vision about something actually happening, because you know that's how demigods work for the most part.
Heavens to Betsy that you actually have some information that actually works.
No, God, we've talked about this before, but these poor demigods don't get a night of sleep. They're just like all night having vivid visions about their future. Yeah, no, it's horrible.
When it comes to it, I like that they kind of have the built-in thing, like, oh yeah, we don't want to use cell phones, and that Percy Jackson kind of like wakes up and just has a kind of a crummy day because, you know, there's going to be a funeral. He kind of goes with Annabeth to help with like cabin inspection, which it's kind of a cute scene where they go to a bunch of the cabins and kind of talk to everybody, but also they're still very distant.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of explaining the gradual change in like the morale of camp. Like that's kind of what these first few chapters have been, is just like really drawing home how like this isn't the Camp Half-Blood that we know from the first book. Like this is, they've lost a bunch of people. Everyone is sort of like leaving and coming back based on like these different quests that they're going on to try and like help the war. Some people have left, some people have defected to the other side that they don't really want to talk about. Some people have died. Like it's a very different camp culture. A lot of people have sort of like lost hope. They're infighting. There's a lot of tension going on.
Yes, it's one of those where it's the motto of you can't go home again sometimes, where it's this big, beautiful place, but then you realize after a couple years, especially during wartime, that things have changed so drastically. Like you see the mold underneath the wallpaper, so to speak.
Yeah, or even if things look the same, people aren't acting the same. There's a certain tension.
People might be looking one way, but their eyes tell a different story.
Yeah, or like they're straight up just like arguing, because I really think that just like even the
bickering.
campers that normally got along with each other are like having issues, because there's just like no optimism in like the camp culture in this book so far. They're just like all like, oh yeah, I guess we could do this, we'll have this plan, and then that plan doesn't work. And like, you know, there's sort of like Hail Mary was the plan of them going on to the Princess Andromeda and like blowing it up and everything, and that ended up not even really being effective and also killed Beckendorf. So it's kind of like the worst case scenario. They don't know what to do. Yeah.
And it's kind of interesting that you have this situation now, especially with kids, whereas you would think that Clarice and all the people in Ares' cabin would have like almost like a field day. It's like a buffet. Num 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 num. Give me some more of this war, delicioso.
No, but instead they're like being weird and petulant, where they just like want the spoils of war, basically, and arguing about that.
Well, they're very territorial, which is weird because you'd think during wartime Clarice would get her act together.
Yeah, it seems, I don't know, maybe this is just Clarice's personality, but again, this is kind of what I was talking about with Percy and Annabeth. I feel like she acts really immature even for her age. You know what I mean? Because she'll give you an inch and then all of a sudden she'll backtrack. Like you think she's made progress as far as like, oh, she's not as like aggressive or defensive, or you know what I mean? And then all of a sudden she'll be really like regress back to the way that she was in the first book, where she'll just like want hers and not care about anyone else.
Here's the thing when it comes about Clarice, is that the way that Rick Riordan writes her is that she's supposed to be very boneheaded like.
Yeah.
Which makes no sense to me, because I feel like we've gotten past that, where I think everyone needs to grow up. Like, yeah, she can be aggressive, but she shouldn't be 30 feet back and she has no character development. That's kind of the problem, is that you have that.
Yeah, no, that's exactly how I feel a little bit. It's interesting because like last episode we were trying to talk about different things I don't like about this series, and I guess this didn't spring to mind at first, but it is kind of true that sometimes the character development feels inconsistent, where you think that like there's been a specific scene or even like an entire arc in a book where a character learns something, and then it feels like the next book some of that has been undone. Do you know what I mean? Like even in, you know, Sea of Monsters, there was some growth with Clarice's character. She seemed to like get along with Percy more. He did save her life to some extent. Like obviously she was going to have the weird posturing defensive thing, but there was something there. And then now she's like regressed to being sort of similar to the way she was and like hasn't made any progress, it seems. Maybe not any progress, but like hardly any, it seems like.
She kind of has like the boomerang effect of like characters. Like you have all this character progression and then it kind of comes all the way back, which makes no sense because we've had the short stories, we had her in Sea of Monsters, and it's kind of, it's such, hurts my brain sometimes because I like Clarice as a character when she's actually acting like Clarice and not like this weird type of foil. I understand what Rick Riordan is doing, where he's trying to make conflict. And yeah, I guess it's like that weird like interpersonal conflict. Like, of course, like when they start fighting, it's going to be like this big heroic moment where either Clarice comes up on the chariot because they're fighting over a dumb chariot that flies, a flying dumb chariot. This sounds like an album that sounds really dumb too. Flying Dumb Chariot.
Yeah, it's like a chariot. I don't really see, it just sort of seems like arbitrary. And I feel like the intent of this story, of this like specific plot point, is that I guess Ares can be, like Ares' cabin in general can be a little petulant, they can be a little stubborn, Clarice in particular, and then also the fact that like this whole war going on is maybe making people act unfairly to each other. They're sort of like weird and stir crazy and they're infighting because of this.
Clarice kind of does talk about this a little bit and how she feels like Ares is getting the short side of the stick. Like every time she's gone on a quest, Percy's kind of been there. Like everyone's been dissing her since pretty much book one. And that might play a part.
I mean, I kind of get that.
But even though I can see a monster, she's the one that returned the Golden Fleece. She's the one that got all the credit.
Yeah.
She was the one that got to the, I think, USS Indianapolis, delivered the chariots.
Yeah, exactly.
And there's a lot of things where, again, it's the boomerang effect, which, again, I like Clarice as a character. I think this is more apparent where you see Rick Riordan. He's a good author, but the problem, though, is sometimes he just doesn't know how to write drama. Like, it's kind of weird. Like, he's really good at, like, the mystery. He's really good at the action. But when it comes to, like, kids behaving is the hardest part.
Yeah, it's the drama. I think it's like a manufactured drama where you're like, okay, you've already sort of worked through this conflict. You can't then regurgitate this conflict in the same way you have before just to like create tension, right? Because obviously there's the grander tension of the war that's happening and Kronos and these different titans that are headed their way, and possibly there's another secret plan that they're being distracted by, and there's obviously a lot of, you know, balls in the air, so to speak, as far as the plot is concerned. But I guess he's trying to like come up with like more minor plots within the camp to kind of like characterize how different people are acting, but it ends up seeming like he's just like forgetting other things that have already happened with the characters.
Now, is this because this book actually has a couple more chapters that he wants to make this book a lot longer, so he needs to add more conflicts? Maybe that might be the reason? It's hard to explain.
I honestly think it was because he is trying to like illustrate how like people are acting, maybe not
before
themselves at camp
after?
Or whatever, like yeah, just like, oh, because of the war everyone is acting so mean to each other or something like that. It's sort of like this culture change, but it just seems like a cop out as far as like, oh, we'll pick the Ares cabin because they're like the de facto antagonists on camp, you know?
You know, I'm like a self-labeled optimist. I'm pretty much like Phil in this situation. I believe that wouldn't it be during wartime you'd want to all be together? I mean, they do go to a camp where they train for this type of situation.
The whole time, right?
Yeah, they train for war. Like you feel like
and
this is
their
where
Ares cabin. Ares cabin is the cabin of war. They should be so stoked.
No, this is their military boner right here. This is like a full course meal. They're like, oh yes, war. I love it. Nom 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 nom.
Yeah, and instead they're like, oh, this chariot is so important. And I guess maybe it's just that they're like sort of petty. I don't know. It's kind of an interesting like focus that he decides to have.
Is it their fatal flaw that they're all idiots? Or maybe, you know what, B? Oh my god, I'm an idiot. B, it makes sense because when it comes to war, they fight over pointless things and they keep having the same type of like almost like a gear where it keeps turning. It's the exact same, either it's for land, possession, or resource.
Maybe that has to do with the characterization of Aries campers. Maybe I've been wrong and I just kind of like wanted to believe that Clarice changed more than she did.
Or maybe we're just trying to find like a reason to do this and talk about why it's bad.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't necessarily think it's bad. I just thought that like there could be they could have put a different conflict here. Do you know what I mean? Something more complicated.
They already have a built-in conflict, which is the spy. They should be all pointing fingers and having like a McCarthy witch hunt.
The spy, exactly. It should have been the spy instead of this whole like weird thing about a chariot. I don't see how it's relevant to the plot. Like maybe I'm totally missing something and it ends up being like a super plot relevant chariot that comes and saves the day like at the last moment. But for the most part, I feel like we should be focusing on the fact that like, yeah, like, you know, later on in the chapter, they're like, oh, wait, right. There is a spy in the camp. Like that seems more important, right?
It does seem more important, and it feels like something like if you're going to have a built-in conflict, why don't you put it within the environment where people are pointing fingers? You're having like your McCarthy witch hunt where like you're pointing fingers. Like I have a list of all known people that have talked to Luke, and of course the person on the list would be Annabeth. Like I feel like that would be an interesting conflict to have. Though, can I say any more about this? I could, but I feel like when it comes to it, I feel like it's such a dumb thing. Like, for me, I use like my logical brain. Like, why don't you just share the chariots? Like, you guys have it Monday through Wednesday, and everyone else has it Wednesday through Friday. And then you don't use it on Saturday or Sunday. There you go. It solved your problem.
I feel like this is one of those chapters that really makes me relieved that our, like, the fate of humanity doesn't rest in the hands of teenagers like it often does in YA books, because oh my god, would we be screwed? Do you remember the way you were when you were 16? I do, and I would have been a horrible hero. I would have been so mean. I would have been Clarice.
I have a fun story. I used to date a girl, and she was in Model UN.
Oh, jeez.
I remember this. I can't believe I haven't brought this up yet. I once used to hang out with her in the club, and they were doing a thing about, I think it was like simulated war. And this one weird kid was like, I'm going to nuke everybody and use all my resources. And everyone's like, oh no, don't do that. I'm like, what are you guys going to do?
This feels like
Canada?
A sitcom plot or something.
It does. Like, well, it's because he was just like almost being like a warmonger, but it's the funniest thing that I've ever seen. This like little kid being
this
super passive aggressive. Because, well, not like really like Napoleonic, but it was just really funny to see a sophomore like, oh man, with all this power. Just imagine, I can't even decide what I want for breakfast, let alone how am I going to decide the fate of the world.
When it comes down to it, I think that that's what the point of this chapter is, and maybe that's why we're like, oh my god, why don't they like just look past their differences or something? Like, of course, everyone has, you know, their own hang-ups, and sometimes they bicker in important moments where they should be coming together. I get that. That happens with adults. Of course, that's going to happen with teenagers, and maybe that's the thesis of this chapter. And I don't know, maybe we're giving too much credit to the campers, and it makes sense that they would be fighting over silly things.
I think we also have to step back and realize this is a book made for teenagers in YA, and that we're looking at this as like logical adults, like, oh, this is what you would do, almost like parenting. Like, okay, why don't they split the chariots? Why don't they do this? But as a kid,
like a King Solomon or whatever, being like, all right, cut the chariot in half.
No, it's a Gordian knot. That's what it is. You cut it in half.
No, I mean, literally, no, but King Solomon, because he's just like, they're fighting over the baby, and it's like, okay, we'll cut the baby in half, and then obviously the person who doesn't want the baby cut in half, you know what I'm saying? So it's the chariot thing. It's like, oh, they'd rather have someone else have it as opposed to destroy it kind of thing. Though I do think Aries' cabin would be the kind who would be like, yeah, split it in half, but make sure it's perfectly in half, even though it would make it useless, you know? That's a very Aries' cabin move.
Yeah, I mean, they could do that, and then they get like Hephaestus to make like a cyborg chariot.
Other half.
Yeah, to make the other half. But speaking of that, going through the cabin checks, they go to Selena, and she's all crying. She's like, Percy, would you like a bonbon?
Oh, yeah, she's traumatized.
Oh,
yeah.
No. See you all in therapy, everybody.
She had a rough go of it these past
couple chapters. Can Rachel refer her therapist, maybe?
Yeah, her hamster therapist.
I'm usually for pets. Is there such thing as like a pet bereavement therapist? Just
probably.
Practices? There has to be. I would love to watch that TLC show or the Animal Planet show.
That sounds so much like an Animal Planet show. It really does.
It's someone trying to get over the loss of their pet goldfish.
Yeah, the whole scene with Selena is
It's sad.
A pretty depressing one. She's like going through like a combination breakup / bereavement period. And her bonbons don't even taste good from her her dad's job. She says they taste like cardboard. And I like how I love that Percy just eats one anyway. I didn't have anything against cardboard, so I tried one. I love that sort of like hungry teenager boy energy where it's just like, well, cardboard is something. I'll eat it. Sure. Give it over.
When you're a teenager, you'll eat anything. I don't care. You go to a potluck, I'll eat anything, even if it's gross. Well, it's here. Might as well try some.
Yeah.
But I do kind of like that they finally explain what happens when a demigod and a demigod start dating, this OTP. And you know what it is?
That they're not technically related, right? It's like that.
Yeah, it's that there's god DNA and the half-blood DNA don't quite mix. So as long as they're not in the same cabin, which I feel like that might be a problem, and they have to reinforce that for like the Apollo cabin where a bunch of people don't know if they're claimed or not.
Yeah, what does that mean? So, like, if you're unclaimed, then you have no idea. It's like, it's real Calvin ball out there where it's like, if you date someone in another cabin, you don't know if you actually belong in that cabin because you've been unclaimed. And then it just makes it even creepier that your godparent hasn't claimed you.
So is this where we like use like 21andMe or whatever?
Yeah, no, 23. Well, you lessened the number of chromosomes there, Zach. There's 23 chromosomes.
What, do you want the other
21 and me, you'd be like, you're a few short there, Neanderthal.
Okay, whatever. I thought 23andMe was just the age, not the amount of chromosomes.
No, it's not the age. Who's the age of who? The age of the guy who invented 23andMe? No, it's the number of chromosomes.
Because they sell it to like dumb 23-year-olds.
23andMe, infamously invented by a 23-year-old. I'm sorry. I'm going to stop dunking on you because we need to finish this episode.
I can't breathe. This is great. This is all staying in, by the way, guys.
Oh, jeez. Anyway, yeah, I could see, like, yeah. Well, this is even from the age before DNA tests were, like, commercially available. You couldn't even go on, like, Ancestry or something.
But I like that there's a built-in explanation for this, though it kind of might be a little lazy because it's like, okay, we have to explain this really quickly, but not in like the coitus sense. We have to explain this. Yeah,
not in like a weird graphic way. So they have to like kind of broach the subject. It's like an awkward paragraph where he's like, very quickly, just so you know, they're not related. And then they move on. And then Percy just says, anyway, for some reason, I was thinking about this as I watched Annabeth straighten up, which are like, oh, Jesus.
Okay. B, this seems like a weird insert. Like this was put in after the fact. Like this was just the right person to put it in.
Yeah, like an editor note. Like, could you please finally explain this? We have one last book to assuage people's concerns about this being creepy. Can you please just like write a quick paragraph and just sort of like slot it right in here?
Now, B, is this a good explanation? Is this something like, it isn't like Harry Potter, it's just like witches and wizards go at it. Hunger Games, good luck if you're in the right district. Here it's still, no matter which way you cut it, it's weird.
Okay, well, hold on. Hunger Games is just the same area of the country. That's like being like, oh, two people from New York dating. That's a little weird. Like, no, that's not like the same thing as like you have the same parent. Do you know what I'm saying?
Don't give Susan Collins any fodder because she's going to write a new book where it's the forbidden love between someone from District 8 and like District 1. Don't do it.
I mean, did that
there's
not
weird
happen
races and
already?
stuff like that. They'll talk about it.
No, Susan Collins too busy minding her own business, cashing all of her royalty checks.
No, she's writing a prequel to the Hunger Games.
Oh, right, she is. I forgot about that.
Because there was the big plan, because they were going to have a Hunger Games theme park.
Sam is over on the couch wording the words prequel to me over and over again.
Prequel, yeah. But yeah, you can see that's like the weird forbidden love thing, though. Here, no matter which way you cut it, it's still weird.
No, exactly. Because that's the thing, is like, that's even, if you were to grow up with like an adoptive sibling or something like that, just because you're not DNA related, it might be a little weird. I don't know. But then again, it's not a Listen, we've talked about this. I'm not exactly sure to what extent it's weird, but either way, I don't think any of them should be dating because they're all like emotionally really immature and don't know how to talk. So, they should wait a little bit until the whole saving the world thing is wrapped up and then maybe they can go on some dates.
When it comes to it, romance, for me, when it comes to books, it I don't know, I'm not really like, there's people that love like the romantic stuff, but for me, I like character conflicts. Like for me, I love political thrillers. If the romance works, it works, and I have nothing to complain about. But it's still weird in a kid's book in the sense where they actually have to explain DNA, quote unquote. It gets weird.
It almost makes it weirder that he mentions it, I guess, because also it's like, it's not like they're getting married anytime soon or something. They're not like settling down and starting a family. They're just like
They're
teenagers
16.
going to watch like the fireworks together and holding hands. I don't know if like the DNA conversation is even really pertinent.
That's like more of a conversation you have when you're 17. Maybe the legal age of 18.
It was exactly. It just seems a little bit like they were just covering their bases. I understand why it happened, but we talked about it. We mentioned it, but it is a little weird. It's almost like, oh, you mentioned the elephant in the room, and now it's weird because the elephant's there, and we're talking
Hey guys,
about him.
what are you guys talking about me? Talk about my white elephant?
Yeah, I kind of just wish that they didn't even bring up the elephant.
Even the blind people describing the elephant would be like, dude, this is creepy, and we're blind. But moving on, it gets to the part where we have our Disney Channel original movie where Percy Jackson kind of spills his beans. Why'd you spill the beans, Percy? About the dream about Rachel. And guess what? Annabeth takes it as well as you think it would. She hates him.
Yeah, okay, first of all, this is expected, but good on Percy for being honest. I mean, I would have been annoyed at him if he withheld it, but kind of wouldn't have blamed him, because as we've established, Annabeth gets, like, weird and defensive, even though they're not dating, and it's not like she's ever, directly communicated anything in her life.
See, this is where I get the headache of, like, the teen drama aspect is it's fine in small doses, but here's the problem, though, is that it's all happening all at once in this one chapter, and it's kind of driving me a little batty.
No, I do think that this chapter, was very focused on the interpersonal relationships of the people in camp, because, I think we're gonna get into more of, the actual battle stuff and more of, the higher stakes later on in the book, so they're kind of all right, well, let's do, a quick little check-in with all the relationship stuff, because we're gonna have to wrap this up in this book, because this is the end of the series.
And everyone's mad and angry and crying.
Yeah, it's just I don't know. You don't really need to manufacture drama. There's a war going on. I don't really see why you need to be weird, oh my god, does he like me? I don't know. Just ask. You've almost been murdered together several times. Just a thought.
Yeah, I think maybe at that point I'd be like, hey, yo, girl, you wanna maybe get a malt somewhere and talk about why we are nearly dead several times and I like you?
I've talked about how Annabeth is my least favorite when she's weird and jealous, because she seems so wise and level-headed in so many other circumstances, but when it comes to this other girl who isn't really as much of a threat as Annabeth thinks she is, because again, if she had just sort of staked her claim and been Percy, we're in a relationship, then it wouldn't be a problem, but instead she's just passive-aggressive about it, and that's really frustrating and doesn't feel like it fits in with the rest of how Annabeth reacts.
Now, before we say that all we've been doing this episode has been dunking on it, I have to say that...
Yeah, we've been dunking on it. No, it's not I dislike this chapter. It's just sort of not my favorite direction for the book to go in.
No, not necessarily. So when it comes to it, this happens a lot. I have some major problems when it comes to Harry Potter and the later books with the same type of teen drama, especially in Deathly Hallows between the locket where Ron sees Harry and Hermione naked in the bubble.
Yeah, exactly. The bubble, the weird thing. Yeah. Do you know that when they were filming that what was it? Was it
Rupert
Daniel
Grint
Radcliffe started laughing, or was it Rupert? It was Rupert Grint who was laughing. Yeah.
Yeah, because it's so ridiculous and dumb.
He was this is absurd.
No, this is absurd. But you see that it's no matter what book you have with young adults, I think it might be not a problem with the author, but it's how does an author kind of articulate teenage romance, because it's always changing. Yo, girl, you want to borrow my vape? I don't know why I'm using vapes in this situation.
What do teens say?
Yo, dog, you want to go to the sock hop? I don't
feel
know.
We're just going to get a bunch of emails of people saying, okay, boomer, despite the fact that we're both in our 20s.
No, I'm a millennial.
Yeah. Oh, we can tell. We all can tell.
Well, you're a millennial too. Okay, millennial.
No, exactly. We're in this boat together. We're asked to work for nothing. We're millennials.
Yeah, B. But when it comes to it, I feel it's really hard to write a realistic romance unless you're writing just a straight up romance book. But even then, you all have the joke about the Fabio covers. You have that joke about like, I think, what is it? The people that love romance is like the conflict. Like, people love 50 Shades of Grey. It's not a good book, but people like it
it's
for the
just the
weird
drama.
conflict stuff. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
the drama. And that's what, I guess, middle-aged Karens love. Is
I mean,
the
I'm
drama.
sure there's other reasons that people read books like that, but I see what you're saying. Yeah, I see what, like, it's sort of difficult to balance all of these things happening, right? And I think that's why a lot of times, like, YA can be written poorly, because when you're trying to write, like, this sort of fantasy
Don't even get me
world,
started about Fault in
and
Our
you're also
Stars.
trying to write about children. Okay, well, I mean, Fault in Our Stars is totally different, though, because that's like a straight up YA romance book, and in some ways I think that deals with romance a lot better, even though it's like not my favorite YA book, just because it's more like it knows what it's doing. It's like just committing to that bit, as opposed to like this where it's like there's this whole big thing happening with a bunch of gods and also there's romance, and like sometimes it feels tacked on or like not as well thought out as it could be.
Yes and no, because when it comes to like The Fault in Our Stars, there's a lot of like cringy moments in that too, where it's just pretentious kids being super pretentious in that way.
Okay, but at the same time, that's intentionally so, because they're supposed to be pretentious.
Well, yes,
Yeah.
that's what I'm trying to get at here, is that it can be really, really cringy, even though that's how the author wrote it. To a lot of people, because a lot of people don't get necessarily the joke about that, even though there's nothing to joke about when it comes to cancer. But like, even when John Green was writing it, he was just trying to have fun with it when talking about like a terrible subject.
Yeah. No, I know what you're saying, because I think, well, that's what we're saying with this chapter, too. It's like, just because you're intentionally making teenagers annoying doesn't make it less annoying to read. Like, I
No.
get that can be a believable characterization, that, like, a 16-year-old might be bad at talking to another 16-year-old, but at the same time, it's like sometimes not my favorite plot. It's like I'd rather find out what's happening with, like, I don't know, the giant monster that's headed for New York City. That might be more important.
I hate to say it, but this reminds me of a movie, B. This reminds me of the Rebel Wilson movie, Isn't It Romantic?, where she falls into like a rom-com.
Oh, yeah.
And she's trapped. It's a lot like a bunch of other movies. There's what was it? There was the one with John Candy where he falls into his own sitcom.
Oh, yeah, I didn't see
Pleasantville.
that one. Yeah.
We talked about it, but there's something that's like, when it comes to it, there can be a charm to romance. And even when it comes to like kid relationships, some of them do work. I think if I'm going to talk about a relationship here, and I don't know why, but I think the relationship between Quigley and Violet works.
Well, it's done very subtly, you know.
Well, it's done very subtly, but also their big romantic moment is them just simply sitting on a frozen waterfall.
And, well, I mean, that's totally different, because I do think that was a subversion of the romance thing in YA, where Daniel Handler intentionally was like, I'm not going to show you this on the page. I'm going to want you to just sort of like understand that, exactly, extrapolate, because it actually is like less cringy sometimes to like actually make it happen off page as opposed to like focusing on it. It's a different approach, because I think Rick Riordan more directly like went head on of like, okay, these are teenagers, these people are interacting. It's more of like the J.K. Rowling thing of being like, all right, let's have a whole plot about the Yule Ball. Do you know what I'm saying? It's like, all right, well, let's reckon with the fact that simultaneously these kids are magic and are also like developing and becoming humans. At a certain point, is it bad writing for like YA romance to roll your eyes, or is it accurate writing because teenagers say weird, cringy stuff to each other when they're in love? It's kind of both. You know what I mean?
Okay. Oh God, that reminds me. I have said some weird, cringy things to my significant other.
Exactly. I'm sure. Think back to the way that you were at the age of these campers. It's like you can't really judge to some extent, I'm sure.
I've told the story on air before where I learned Klingon slightly to impress a girl.
Oh, yes, you did tell me the story. And now I have to remember it again and feel secondhand embarrassment anew.
Yes. So, you know what? I'm just going to go leave now because I realize that I am as cringy as Percy Jackson.
You're literally like, you know what? Glass houses, throwing stones all over the place. I think I'm going to leave before my house is just shattered on the ground.
Yeah, it happens. And of course, what happens is they have their huge drama thing where they have to split apart, where Percy and Annabeth are finally, their relationship is almost severed. And they're going to be angry at each other because of Rachel, because she's immortal. You can't be with a mortal. You have to be with me.
Yeah, it's like it's again, we've made this comparison before. It's like the Muggle thing of being like, oh, she's like not like us magic people. She's different and doesn't understand. And it's I don't know.
It kind of reminds me of there's a fantasy trope where it's like, oh, she's not like all the other girls. She likes things like knives and pants, as my friend Liz says on the Duke and Duchess.
Do you think that Annabeth is that? Or do you think that...
No, because we don't get into her headspace. All she does is wear jeans and a like tank top. She isn't like that because she can be feminine.
She does fulfill the like badass girl trope though a little bit, where it's just like, oh, she's like really assertive.
I think that's more. That was no. I don't think that's the case because I think that trope was filled by Thalia.
Oh, I mean, like, but there isn't just one. I mean, Thalia definitely. It's not like one or the other because they're kind of both that because they're not even that dissimilar. Thalia and Annabeth, they have a lot.
No,
in common.
But she's the same type of like punk rock chick that
that's
people
true. They
love.
more focus. Well, I mean, remember we made fun of the way that Talia's outfit is described is basically like Ebony, Darkness, Dementia, Raven Way is described.
Yeah, exactly.
In My Immortal. So.
But you see that there's different things. But when it comes to Annabeth, I feel like she has more of a progression in the way of like she likes to be feminine, but she can also be very masculine at times. Like she doesn't mind getting dirty. She doesn't mind winning. She doesn't mind fighting. And then there's parts where like she learns how to dance. She puts on makeup. She kind of wants to join the Hunters of Artemis because she has these weird feelings for Percy. So she wants to become a maiden forever and join a cult. You know, as it is. But
you know, when you're going through a difficult time and you want to join a cult, it happens. It happens to the best of my friends when they were 16.
Yeah, ask Sarah.
She just made pointed eye contact with me.
Oh man, but you see those conflicts, you see those problems, and when you get to the funeral, this is where everything gets really, really sad. Where you see they burn the shroud. Obviously, Beckendorf is scattered to the winds already because he's been in the sea, and hopefully he goes to Elysium, and he kind of finds some conflict. This is where it reminds me of Twin Peaks, when they have Laura Palmer's funeral and people like jumping on the casket, and it's just the funniest thing. Yeah, it's like overly dramatic.
Yeah, like really dramatic. Yeah, it's I have expected Selena to sort of like fully be like, take me with you. You know what I mean? Like just, you know, self-immolate or something. She kind of has that like really like hysteric like mourning person energy, which is like weird because again, she was his girlfriend. It's not like they were married or something. Yeah, but again, that's like the very specific description of like a certain kind of young love where it's like, you know, you're crazy in love. You'll do anything. You're like so like wrapped up in this person. When they go to Selena's bunk, she has pictures of Beckendorf all over her, you know, above her bed and everything, and it's like weeping and eating chocolate. So
the difference though, it's more tragic here because she knows where she could find Beckendorf. She just needs to go to the underworld. But she can't get him back.
No, she can't. Only Percy can get dead people back, apparently.
No, Percy's mom was never dead.
That's true. She wasn't fully dead. But, like...
Even with, like, Nico and Bianca wanted to stay dead. Like, it hasn't happened so far.
No, Bianca stayed dead. Well, because then we talked about this in the last book because of the whole thing with, you know, the automaton and Daedalus and how, like, you shouldn't go against the natural way of things and...
Oh, no, Beckendorf is going to become, like, a robot? Or, like, Hey, Selena, I put my brain in an AI construct.
Or it'd be like Beckendorf, like Pet Cemetery, and he just, like, won't be the same. Do you know what I mean? You don't want any of that kind of stuff.
Well, don't ask Selena, because that might actually happen. Let's just get Beckendorf's body and put him in this creepy pet cemetery.
Yeah, that's, like, definitely Selena energy, for sure. Because she has, like, that sort of slightly unhinged, hopeless romantic vibe.
When it comes to it, B, I think the funniest part about this is that Percy's trying to make everything better. Like, oh, he loved you. He had a picture of you right before he died. And she just starts breaking down, and Percy doesn't understand, dude, there's a time and place for everything, not at a funeral. B, do you want to hear the funniest thing that happened at my grandma's funeral?
Oh, geez,
she would have loved.
What is it? Are we telling funny funeral stories now? Because I got a good one.
Okay, so what ended up happening is that my grandma got buried, and in the Jewish fashion, you know, we throw her dirt down, and what ended up happening was because it was raining, the person backed up the hearse, and he got stuck in the mud.
Oh, no.
So there's a bunch of tires and we're all horrified. And I turned to my grandfather and been like, if Grandma was standing right next to us, she'd be so embarrassed. This is how she wants to go. She died a pain in the ass. She's gonna go into the ground a pain in the ass.
Well, that's sort of like, okay, here's my funny funeral story where it was my aunt's funeral and my cousin went to place a flower at her grave and he tripped and almost fell into the open grave, which would have been an interesting sort of way to like, all right, well, I guess we're gonna leave cousin Tommy down in there. Goodbye, Tommy.
I think the funny thing about my story as well as it gets better is the people digging the hole all looked kind of annoyed as they had to carry her casket to the actual gravesite.
And like, this gal.
Yeah, this gal. These people waiting here. And it was just, that was the moment where we all laughed and realized this is how my grandma wanted to go. She wanted us to be let out with laughter rather than having this horrific thing of like, we had to carry your body. We said all these prayers. But at the end of the day, I think that probably was the best way that she was sent off because it's how people want to go. Like, when it comes to this is like very ceremonious. This is, you burning of the shroud. You don't have a body. It's like burial at sea almost. And is this a touching scene? No, because Percy Jackson does the exact same thing. It makes everything worse.
Oh, because he's like an oblivious idiot who goes up to her and is like, hey, so Beckendorf carried your picture with you. I hope this doesn't make you cry more. And then she like cries more. And then Clarice, of course, like ever the kind of even more emotionally stunted person is like, what, you idiot, you've made her cry. But she kind of does take comfort in that. Like he kind of said the right thing, but maybe not in like the most eloquent, gentle way possible. He does it in his like very oblivious idiot Percy way where he's like, yeah, here's a sad thing about your dead boyfriend. I'm not gonna be delicate about this.
Is this where like Percy Jackson starts like, so anyways, Beckendorf started blasting?
Yeah, maybe not the best thing to say.
No, but it's hard, and also it's a very, I guess it's a very Percy Jackson scene where you have to have drama, but then you have to have comedy. If you look at Bianca, how she died was like she had the piloting the robot mecha thing, and it's doing like the chicken dance, and then it falls and crushes her. And you have to have like those two type of like tonal things of having comedy and tragedy in that way that Rick Riordan does a lot of, where he has to offset a horrific moment or a sad moment with a joke almost.
This is kind of an interesting scene with Selena and Percy interacting with Clarice there, because then again we focus back on like Clarice's weird hang up about the chariot and like honoring Beckendorf, and Percy says, you could help with that. I suggested you could honor Beckendorf's memory by fighting with us. Clarice went for her knife, but it wasn't there anymore. She'd thrown it on the ping pong table in the big house. Not my problem, she growled. My cabin doesn't get honor, I don't fight. I noticed she wasn't speaking in rhymes. Maybe she hadn't been around when her cabin mates got cursed, or maybe she had a way of breaking the spell. With a chill, I wondered if Clarice could be Kronos' spy at camp. Was that why she was keeping her cabin out of the fight? But as much as I disliked Clarice, spying for the Titans didn't seem like her style. So, like, do you think that that's part of why they made such a big deal about the chariot thing? Is like that works as sort of a red herring of like, oh, maybe it's Clarice, but like I feel like that would be so obvious, right?
It seems obvious. Sometimes it's the most unlikely person, but
I
who
think
knows?
It's probably
Maybe
an unlikely person, yeah.
It was Percy the entire time.
I mean, if it was an unlikely person, it'd be someone like Selena,
Yeah. But what if it was something like, well, see, Luke can like look into people's dreams too. Is this Percy Jackson every time he goes to sleep?
Oh,
the
oh my
spy's
God.
unintentional.
It's like that really bad game, Heavy Rain, where like the guy keeps blacking out and he thinks he might be the origami killer.
Origami?
Yeah, that's how they pronounce it,
God.
because it's like a really bad voice actor that they get. I don't know.
Jason! Oh, I love press X for Jason.
Oh, press X for Jason. Put an F in the chat for Jason.
Yeah, F in the chat for Jason.
Put an F in the chat for Beckendorf.
I like as if this is live, yeah.
Yeah, we're doing a live stream about Beckendorf's funeral.
Oh, we're live streaming Beckendorf's funeral? That seems kind of sad. Especially
just
with
zoom
all the
in
stuff.
on Selena's weeping face.
But yeah, I'm just like behind you, you're the camera operator. I just like whisper in your ear, keep the cameras rolling.
Yeah, as like Clarice is having some sort of like episode about the chariot.
Oh man, so the chapter kind of ends with everyone's sad. Beckendorf's funeral
everyone's
went
been
really
sad,
bad,
to be honest, but yeah.
Well, Percy didn't make it better. So what ends up happening is Percy Jackson wants to go let off some steam, so he's going to go meet up with his favorite pup in the whole world. Not Rosie, unfortunately, but Miss O'Leary.
Yeah, Miss O'Leary, do you want me to read the name of the next chapter?
B, what is the name of the next chapter?
The name of the next chapter is Chapter 5, I Drive My Dog Into a Tree.
Does AAA count for that?
Yeah, I think it's obviously Miss O'Leary. I'm pretty sure that's his one and only dog. Hellhound, but same thing.
His Doge?
His Doji. His
His
giant dog.
I like my favorite picture I've seen so far is the one where Miss O'Leary is a gigantic Chow Chow.
That's really good. Yeah.
Personally, I would love if it was like a really tiny dog that's giant, like a heckhound.
Oh no, I'm thinking of Cerberus, but same idea of like a 3-headed Rosie or something.
A 3-headed Rosie.
Yeah, but or just like a great big Rosie.
Well, I would love it if it was like a gigantic wiener dog for like.
Yeah, a great big dachshund. Yeah, I think today I went to like this craft fair and I saw a magnet for dachshund owners that said "Death comes from the ankles down," which I thought was great.
Well, no, then Percy Jackson could be like, Miss O'Leary, wiener attack.
Yeah, I like Miss O'Leary, so I'm looking forward to that chapter. Though I bet it's going to be sad because of the whole Beckendorf thing. But other than that,
yeah, life is rough sometimes.
Oh no. Yeah.
Are you ready to read some emails?
This episode brought to you by Mythological Bark Box, where only us can provide your giant milk bone needs. The first one is from Liam, who says, Hello, Zack and B. Get ready to read the shortest email you have ever gotten. Bless you, friend. I just wanted to clear something up that was brought up. The curse that Ares put on Percy was carried out in the Titan's Curse when Percy was fighting Atlas. If you read back, you will see. P.S. Zach, when you made the Matrix reference, I was so happy because I actually got it. Thank you.
I don't know. I think that there's actually like a debate when it actually happened, so I don't know about that. I don't know if that's a spoiler or not.
I'm not sure. I don't know. I'll be honest. I don't remember 100% of the things that happen in the books. Sometimes they slip through my grasp.
Gasp.
Yeah, I'm an imperfect person. Screws fall out all the time. The world's an imperfect place.
To be honest, I like doing Matrix references, though there's going to be a part where I'm going to be talking about the Matrix a lot, and I'm not looking forward to it, because then I have to watch The Matrix Reloaded, and I hate that movie, and then I hate the third one, because they're all terrible except for the first one.
I've never seen a Matrix movie.
The first one's good, and then they get bad. And then also the Wachowskis also made Jupiter Ascending, the worst movie I've ever watched.
Oh, you mean the most exquisitely horrible yet interesting movie with Eddie Redmayne as some sort of intergalactic twink? Yeah, I don't know.
No, Eddie Redmayne.
Eddie Redmayne just is an intergalactic twink, though, so that's not even acting.
Yeah. He just came from his gigantic twink ship, the Twinkle, he called it.
Okay, we need to move on. Oh my god. Hey, Zack and B, love the podcast. I tried writing an Apple review, but for some reason I don't think it uploaded. Anyway, I've been listening to it during my independent lab hours, and it really makes the time fly. The podcast gives me such great nostalgia. I love how B thought through the Big Prophecy, same difference. Personally, I love the Magnus Chase books. I hope you both do those books next. I'm actually not a big fan of Heroes of Olympus. This is like contradicting what I just said. Just because the narration style changes and there's so much bad teenage romance. Oh, geez, we just talked about this. Just a small critique. I do really like how much humor you put into your analysis, but sometimes when you both go into a character's death, the humor comes up. I'm gonna hate this episode. I'm so sorry. Did you not read this email before I'm sorry, I'm losing my mind. All right.
I forgot about it until right now. Not planned.
I never read the deaths as humorous, so it's a little jarring to hear jokes around Bianca and Beckendorf's deaths and how the campers reacted to it. Anyway, I really do like the podcast. Keep up the good work. Oh, geez, I am so sorry about this episode that you just listened to. Which is just completely, you're not going to be a fan, Maya. I'm so sorry.
Okay, so we talked about my dead grandma. We talked about your dead aunts.
Yeah, we talked about
terrible funerals.
Yeah, we talked about bad teen romance. At least we're on the same page with that. We said that we're probably going to read
Are we stuck in a bad romance?
Next. Oh, man, you're just going to be like real angry about, anyway.
Okay, so if I want to give a serious answer for this.
Yes, I have an answer to this too. Do you want to go first?
I will go first to this, and that is, for me, when I look at death, it's something that death isn't really absolute. It's okay to make fun and joke because death can be a very serious thing. Like for me, I kind of want to do like the Andy Kaufman approach of making people laugh at my funeral. I feel like, have you ever seen Jim Henson's funeral? It's the most beautiful thing I've ever seen in my life.
No, I haven't. But I mean, was it humorous in some way?
Well, it was humorous because all the Muppets came out and sung a song at his funeral.
Oh.
It was really touching.
That's heartbreaking, actually. But I see what you're saying. Yeah, I mean, personally, I think that like gallows humor can be funny. I mean, we were just talking about examples from our own life. When we make jokes about characters dying, it's not necessarily saying like their deaths didn't matter or it like wasn't emotionally impactful or whatever, but it's more like trying to show that there's humor in negative things that happen. And I think that that's sort of like a Percy Jackson ethos to some extent too. Like he makes jokes in, you know, really life-threatening scenarios because that's kind of like the way that some people like deal with horrible things happening is they make jokes about it.
And I think the most important thing is that the way we talk about stuff is we try to be respectful as possible. Like we're not going to talk about how Beckendorf blew up into like a million pieces and then we laugh like that.
No,
I think
it's
we
not
did kind
funny
of make a
that
couple
he died.
jokes like
Yeah.
that. It's not funny that he died, but it's funny to think about like the circumstances that led up to his death, but it isn't the death itself. Because when it comes to kids dying, especially in any media, I know I've talked about this many times. There's no going back once you kill a kid. And you got to kind of either be humorous, not about killing the kid. You just have to have like an approach that's respectful. But when it comes to us, because our show is so humorous, we tend to make fun about everything. Doesn't matter what it is. We try to find the humor and the bright side. We talked about dead hamsters having therapy lessons today. Like, there's a lot of things you can talk about.
No, yeah, I just don't want you or anyone to listen to our podcast and feel like we don't take these characters seriously or even like the concept of death seriously. But I do think to some extent in treating death as like something you can't joke about, then that kind of like is also maybe not a healthy way to look at it. That's just like my own personal approach. But yeah.
So B, we didn't get any Apple Podcast reviews, but that's okay. Thank you so much for all these lovely emails. Thank you, everyone. This is our 101st episode.
Yeah,
I was about to say 111th, and that would have been
Dalmatians. I wish I had that many Dalmatians also. Can we have both?
Well, I want the podcast coat. I want to take all our 101 episodes and make it into a fine coat.
A fine coat of wave files.
I don't care how you do it, if you bludgeon them, gas them. I want my podcast coat.
Is that really a quote from 101 Dalmatians? Jeez,
yes.
No wonder we're all so messed up, huh?
I guess, yeah, but that's Cruella de Vil. She's so evil. You know what happens to her at the end of that movie?
Does she die? I don't remember.
No, her car crashes into a snow embankment, and that's it. She's still at large.
Okay.
She doesn't die. She isn't like Clayton
she just has a fender
in Tarzan where he hangs himself. He's not like the guy in Atlantis where he turned into like a weird crystal rock monster and gets decapitated. And these are Disney movies. Well, B, where can they find you?
You can find me on Twitter and Instagram at bkellygorman, and you can find me on Tumblr at twinpoetry.tumblr.com.
If you want to find me on Twitter, you can find me at Suda41. That's SUDA41. If you want to follow our show on Twitter, that's at halfblood_radio. If you want to email the show, you can email us at radiocamphhalfblood@gmail.com. We have a Patreon, patreon.com/radiocamphhalfblood, where you can get episodes early. We're going to be having some new bonus content, hopefully very, very soon. T-shirts available at TeePublic, so go to www.teepublic.com. And I think that's it. Well, guys, I'm Zach.
I'm B.
And let's keep staying mortal. See
Bye,
ya.
guys.
Play it off, Johnny!